No matter how many dead worlds you walk, you never get used to the way silence feels when the air is still working. There's always a small, rational part of your mind cataloguing every functioning system. Lights that draw on a grid, pressure doors that close with a deliberate weight, the sour warmth of a live conduit somewhere beneath your boots, and another, older part that remembers what abandonment should look like. Dead worlds should not sound busy. That's the rule. My name is Commander Ryan Holt, Terraform Division Tau 9, and by the time you're handed the rank to lead planetary reclamations, you learn to keep your awe and fear in check. Most new crews spend their first deployment staring at dust or praying for signs of anything alive. Me? I trust machinery over miracles. If a world can be made habitable again, it's because the numbers say so, not because something is blessed. 4 times now, I've been first on the ground to prove it. On planets that look deader than cold iron until you kicked the right relay. That's what I was expecting on Delta Leonis 4, the long-lost mining colony. Catalogued as a failed settlement more than a century and a half ago, listed as presumed collapse. Infrastructure unrecoverable. 6 months ago, the Surveyor satellites caught a geothermal spike in the northern sector, and my division got the call. Protocol said, fly in, log the anomaly, salvage what you can and flag it for further evaluation if there's any sign of useful tech or untapped resource. That's all. None of the briefings mentioned what we'd actually find. Not abandonment, not derelict machinery, but a city that never stopped working. I logged the descent sequence myself, more out of habit than necessity. The rest of the team fanned out in the lander's tight cabin, strapping in, heads bowed in ritual checklist review. I keep my teams lean, just 6, counting myself. Dr. Vader, our biomedical officer, and the closest thing to optimism we carry. Harper, ex-naval engineer with a knack for finding the one part you're not supposed to touch. Hassan, surveyor and site security. Lean, laconic, better with a bolt gun than conversation. Morales and Yates, environmental systems and comms respectively. The two of them always bickering, always efficient. Atmospheric insertion was bumpy. The red dwarf's glare painted everything in shifting ochre. I remember thinking that, for a dead world, the place looked strangely intact. The colony grid spread beneath us in precise hexagonal blocks, modules linked by conveyor tracks and segmented causeways, the kind of layout you'd only bother with if you planned to stay 100 years. Industrial towers jutted from the perimeter like blunt teeth. Every visible structure showed wear, wind-scoured hulls, seams crusted with metallic salt. But there were lights, and as the thrusters cycled down, I caught the glint of motion on the central transit ring. Touchdown was met with automated acknowledgement, a transmission from the old colonial beacon, voice flat, promising, safe harbor, geothermal core stable, air 78% baseline. The log said the last transmission was in 2297. None of this made sense. We cycled through checks. Hassan led with the detector, sweeping for anything uninvited, biological, technological, or otherwise. Harper ran a diagnostic on the pressure seals before venting the lock. I watched their routines with the satisfaction of someone who has seen it all go wrong before. I was first out. The air bit at my teeth. Dry, mineral-heavy, but not toxic. Every colony tries to flavor its world differently, and this one tasted like copper and damp basalt. The settlement's central avenue was clear, lined with modular workstations and automated loaders resting at awkward angles, as if paused mid-task. Nothing moved except for the fine grit shifting in the wind, until Hassan hissed and pointed. A worker walked the avenue towards us, pale suit stained along the joints, visor webbed with fractures, movement rigid but purposeful. Another followed. Then a group, 10, 20, maybe more, emerging from the refinery's yawning bay doors. They moved with a cadence just a beat off from human, each cradling an object that wasn't there, hands cupped in air. I counted 30 before I realized they weren't wearing EVA seals, just coveralls fused to their bodies, flesh visible at the edges. Morales' voice came over my internal. "They're dead," he said, voice caught between revulsion and awe. "Commander, look at their faces." He was right. Up close you saw the skin was drawn tight, not with decay but with something crystalline, like veins of dirty quartz breaking the surface. No rot, no open wounds, just desiccation and these jagged mineral ridges climbing from jaw to brow. Their eyes were milky, some glazed completely. But the worst thing was the lack of odor. No sweet sick stench of corpse, just the aroma of dust and ozone. "Don't approach," I said, though everyone was already holding back. Hassan steadied his grip on the bolt gun. Harper's fingers hovered near the emergency shutoff for her suit's servo assist. The procession of workers passed within arm's reach. None acknowledged us. One brushed so close I saw the lines on its hands. Deep, glassy fissures, like stress fractures on cooling metal. They moved in parallel columns, stopping at intervals, performing the same looping gestures: lift, carry, turn, deposit, though their hands were empty. They didn't break stride for the idle loaders, didn't interact with the active machinery. They just kept working. "Automated labor, neural mapping, post-mortem feedback," I muttered. "Possible neurocrystalline response to environmental factors. Document and observe, no direct engagement." Yates, always the loudest when uncertain, piped up. "Commander, you want me to run a proximity scan on the next group? See if we're triggering anything?" "Do it," I said, and motioned for Vader to prep her field scanner. For the next hour, we logged their routines. Every worker in the settlement, over 200 we estimated, moved according to precise, repeating paths. When the crew tried to block one of the avenues, the workers paused in perfect sync, faces turning with uncanny unity toward whoever stood in their way. They didn't react with aggression, they just stared. It was the kind of stare that empties the room, makes you aware of every heartbeat. Yates flinched and stepped aside. The line resumed, unbroken, as if nothing had happened. Harper's frustration broke through the tension. "This is a waste of time. They're drones, Commander. Some old feedback loop in the colony OS. Let's cut one open and get on with it." Vader was already moving, scanner pointed at the nearest worker. "No sign of decomposition. Temperature baseline. Look at this. Trace minerals in the dermal layer. High-density crystal deposits at all flexion points. Not possible in a natural corpse. These bodies should have collapsed decades ago." The workers continued their silent parade. Not a single one had spoken, or even made a sound. The only noise was the low grind of distant machines and the periodic shudder of bulk ore lifts operating somewhere underground. Night fell with the same abruptness as the landing. Amber sky draining to blood-dark purple. We set up a temporary base in the command spire, a prefabricated hub at the center of the grid, its windows streaked with the mineral runoff of a century's wind. The interior was cleaner than I'd expected. Power was steady. Diagnostic consoles powered up without complaint, flashing queries for operator login. Harper and Morales debated whether the colony's core systems could be running autonomously. Vader stayed silent, reviewing the mineral scans. I made my first official log entry. Initial contact with persistent post-mortem labor phenomenon. All workers exhibit neurocrystalline ossification. No evidence of hostile behavior, communicable pathogen, or decay. Further analysis required. I don't remember sleeping, just a succession of brief, half-lucid intervals punctuated by comm checks and system alerts. The feeling of being inside a living system, one that didn't care if we were there, or even notice, kept me awake long after the rest had settled in. At 0300 hours, Yates was missing from his bunk. Hassan was the first to spot him, a sliver of movement on the central avenue, captured by the command spire's external cam. Yates, in base layer fatigues and no helmet, was moving in lockstep with the nearest procession of workers, feet bare, eyes glassy, arms curled around empty air. We sprinted down, suits unsealed, adrenaline burning through the caution we'd spent the day building. Yates didn't resist when we pulled him from the line. His skin was cold, lips blue, feet laced with fine cuts and mineral dust. He stared through us, lips moving in silence. When Vader pressed a scanner to his temple, the device registered a single spike. Electrical activity, then nothing. It took 20 minutes to get him back inside. He blinked, mouth slack, no memory of leaving the base or joining the dead. Only when Vader showed him the footage did he start to shake. We locked the doors that night, but the truth was already inside with us. I'd spent a career explaining away anomalies, cataloguing the strange into files and protocols. But there are some rules you don't get to write, and some systems that keep running even after everyone's gone. The morning after we pulled Yates from the line, I noticed how the city's rhythm infected us. I sat in the command spire, waiting for the others to finish diagnostics, and watched a dead woman at a conveyor drop invisible ore into a bin that never filled, each motion repeated with identical precision. I tried, without meaning to time my breathing to her arms. When Yates came around, he kept clenching his fists in the same open and shut pattern, fingers curling as if he was holding something too fragile to break. Vader called it post-incident anxiety. She always preferred medical terms over more superstitious ones. It gave us a false sense of control. I checked Yates's chart myself. No sign of infection, no fever, just muscle soreness and minor abrasions along the arches of his feet, each cut packed with pale grit from the main avenue. He answered my questions in clipped monosyllables, eyes drifting to the window every few minutes. He didn't ask to go outside, but he didn't ask to stay in either. After a while, I stopped pressing. I'd seen this kind of shock before, on worlds where environmental stressors bent people in strange directions. The cause was always quantifiable, at least that's what I told myself. While the rest of the crew reset perimeter beacons and scavenged for diagnostic cables, Vader began running baseline scans on all of us. She set up in the medbay, which was a compact modular compartment inside the spire, lined with composite cabinets and diagnostic tables that folded out from the wall like thin metal tongues. Tau 9 field medbays used a mix of traditional bloodwork and rapid microcrystal analysis, a technology originally designed to catch heavy metal poisoning in asteroid miners. Now it flagged any anomaly in real time, showing a schematic of each crew member's bloodstream, organ function, and immune status. Routine scans, Vader said, glancing up at me as she cleaned a needle gun. Her dark hair was tied back, jaw tight with the focus of someone who's had too many responsibilities stacked onto her badge. We're tracking for microfractures, blood pathogens, and any trace element you don't want to take home. She said it to make us feel better, but she looked too long at the results from Yates's first draw. When I caught her later in the corridor, she handed me a data chip and spoke in a low voice meant for private warnings. I'm seeing something new. There are mineral inclusions in the plasma. At first I thought it was machine contamination, but it's in the cell walls, and it's sharp, crystalline, not organic. She paused, searching my face for signs of alarm. He says he feels fine. I don't believe him. I pocketed the chip and told her to keep it quiet for now. That's what command is, deciding which alarms matter most and when to set them off. Let me know if it gets worse, I said. She nodded, but her hands wouldn't stop fidgeting. I noticed a small scratch on her wrist, raw, surrounded by white dust. She caught me looking, covered it, and changed the subject. Morales and Harper made their way back from the refinery with a load of spare sensors. Harper stomped the grit from her boots, holding up a sensor array still warm from internal batteries. Commander, the workers are running a pattern on the hour. I mapped it with Morales. 18-hour loops, always the same number, same route, never deviating. The lines meet up in the main square and then break apart again. They're not feeding into the mainframe, no digital logs. Whatever they're carrying, it's not showing up on any scan. Harper never liked not knowing. She wore frustration like armor, chipping at every unknown until it bent or broke. They're walking ghosts. If this is a biofeedback loop, it's not one I've seen. We need to cut one open, see what's inside. Not until we have a full pathogen profile, I said, nodding toward Vader. We're still guests here, until we know the rules. It was easier to focus on procedure. The city's central processor, an old model, jury-rigged to interface with geothermal arrays, ran diagnostics on the power grid without complaint. All systems showed maintenance as of 1 week ago. Impossible. The last colonial entry dated back to 2297, and nothing in the official record explained why the geothermal wells were still active, or why the city's automation grid hadn't burned itself out centuries ago. As I cross-checked logs, a new alert pinged in my headset. Hassan's voice, tight with something he didn't want to name. "Commander, you're going to want to see this. Sector 19, East Cradle Bay." I took Vader and Harper with me. Sector 19 was one of the original residential blocks, long since abandoned, its corridors half collapsed and stained with mineral runoff. We picked our way past stacked crates and discarded work suits, each one marked with a faded tag. The walls here had been scrubbed clean, but the floor showed drag marks, long, smooth furrows where something heavy had been moved repeatedly. We found Hassan at the threshold of a small, glass-walled nursery, the kind built for early-generation colonists who wanted children born with at least the pretense of comfort. The cradle was still there, squat and low, carved from pressure-cast polymer and lined with blackened insulation. It rocked back and forth, slow and silent, even though there was no air current, no breeze. Inside, where a child should have slept, there was only a heap of warm grey ash. Hassan wouldn't cross the threshold. His face, always reserved, looked pinched. "There's nothing in the logs about children. Not in this block." I checked. Vader crouched, running her scanner over the cradle, then touching the ash with gloved fingers. Temperatures above ambient by 5 degrees. Ash is mixed. Carbon, calcium, trace silicates. Not enough to account for a full body. It's like it's been added to, not replaced. I didn't realize I'd stepped closer until my hand brushed the cradle's rim. The warmth seeped into my skin, and for a moment I felt an emotion so alien it startled me. An overwhelming guilt, so sharp I had to clench my teeth to keep from letting it out. Something in the back of my mind whispered about responsibility, about promises unkept. It had nothing to do with my own past. I pulled away, shaking off the sensation. "Log it," I said, "and move out." That night, we tried to sleep, but I found myself pacing the command spire, unable to settle. I checked the external cams, reviewing the processions over and over. At one point, I caught my own hands mimicking the gestures of Corpser 8082, a worker I'd tracked since arrival, his torso nearly caved in by a thick, translucent mineral mass, yet moving with fluid, mechanical precision at his post in the refinery. Each time my fingers copied his movements, I stopped and flexed them, shaking off the urge. Around 2 hours before dawn, I noticed Morales standing by the comm station, eyes closed, lips moving in time with an invisible count. When I called his name, he didn't answer for a long time. Finally, he looked up. "Dreams," he muttered. "Digging, hauling, same as them. My arms feel like I've been lifting all night. I wake up sore, like I've been doing real work." Vader's voice came through the medbay comm, brittle with exhaustion. "I need all of you for another round of scans in the morning. I'm seeing changes, sharp flecks in the blood, bone density up by a fraction." I heard the strain behind her composure. I remembered the scratch on her wrist, the white dust clinging to her sleeve. She was hiding her symptoms, or at least downplaying them. It's what medics do. Protect the crew, hold the line, and hope the damage stops with them. In the next cycle, the load ritual began again, always on schedule, never delayed. The dead formed their lines, converged in the main avenue, and began their silent march. This time, I caught Vader standing at the edge, eyes glazed, arms raised as if waiting for someone to hand her a burden. Before I could call out, she stepped into the procession, matching pace perfectly. Her expression vacant, every muscle gone slack. I shouted her name. No reaction. Hassan tried to intercept her, but the nearest workers simply turned to face him, bodies rigid, eyes blank, an unspoken warning. Vader walked the full circuit with them, hands cupped around nothing, eyes fixed on a point far ahead. Her helmet cam showed only endless lines of feet and the slow, measured swinging of her own arms. She vanished into the East Refinery with the others. When we forced our way in after the ritual had passed, there was no sign of her. Her scanner lay on the ground, dusted with mineral ash. The comms board registered her last biometrics for exactly 9 minutes, then nothing. We searched every sector, called her name through every comm band, but the city swallowed the sound. I checked the logs only to find the most recent entries overwriting themselves. Data replaced by repeating lines, corrupted fragments, like someone running a script in an ancient language no one spoke anymore. Harper swore, loud and ugly, when I told her what we'd lost. Yates just watched the main avenue, arms folded tight, lips moving in silent mimicry. I sat by the window as the sky turned the color of rust, and for the first time in my career, I understood what it meant to lose the thread of command. There are things you can order and things you can only witness, and the difference is a gap wide enough to fall through. Somewhere below us, the dead kept working. In the East Refinery, a new worker moved among the old. She carried nothing, but her steps were perfect. No one says it out loud, but the crew is dissolving. There's no protocol for losing a medic to a city of dead workers and not being able to name the cause. I've held teams together through pressure breaches, viral panics, and the long attrition of loss by inches, but this is different. Here, we're cut off from command in every way that matters. The only voice left is my own, and it's starting to sound unfamiliar even to me. Every system in the command spire continues to report nominal status, yet I catch myself checking diagnostics in loops, as if searching for a sign that something, anything, is about to fail. Instead, it's the crew that breaks. Morales sits at the comms panel for hours, tapping out old security codes on the surface with 2 fingers, as if he's trying to wake a machine that won't answer. Yates spends long minutes standing in front of the wide window, mouth moving, arms at his sides, only to turn away with no recollection of what he was doing. Harper keeps herself busy with maintenance, checking the seals on the airlock over and over, swearing under her breath whenever her hand trembles. I keep seeing Vader in my periphery, a flash of her dark hair vanishing behind a bulkhead, the glint of her medkit in a window, or the ghost of her silhouette beside the East Refinery's conveyor. The worst is when I catch myself expecting her voice on the comms, only to remember, a heartbeat later, that there will be no response. The dreams start to change too. They aren't just about labor anymore, lifting, digging, sorting. They're crowded with other presences, blurred faces that drift just outside the focus of memory. Sometimes in that liminal moment before waking, I see a child at the edge of the crowd. She stands perfectly still, watching me, a crude mask of white composite covering her lower face, one side bent out of shape, as if it's been crushed underfoot. When I wake, my hands ache, as if I've been holding something far heavier than my own guilt. On the 3rd cycle without Vader, Harper pulls me aside. She's gaunt from lack of sleep, jaw clenched tight enough to make her voice sound metallic. "Commander, I saw someone in the reactor gallery last night. Not one of the workers. Small, quick. Face was bent." She shakes her head as if to dislodge the memory. And then the main coolant pump failed. Manual override wouldn't respond until the figure was gone. Whatever that is, it's screwing with us. I don't care if it's a hallucination. It's real enough to break things. That's when I start reviewing the helmet cam footage from every possible angle. Most of it is monotonous. Hours of slow, ceaseless labor, machines cycling through endless routines, nothing out of the ordinary. But then, frame by frame, I catch it. A pale shape in the background, never clear, never head-on, always reflected in a dark window or caught just as a door slides shut. A child, maybe 7 or 8 years old by the size of her limbs, wearing a composite mask that's buckled sharply to one side. Every time she appears, there's a spike in system errors, a loader stuck in a feedback loop, a comms relay dropping signal, or a diagnostic process stalling halfway through. No direct evidence, just a pattern that I cannot ignore. I give her a name for my own sanity, the girl with the bent mask. I mark every sighting on the incident logs, though I don't share them with the crew. They're already close to unraveling, and superstition, even unspoken, spreads like mold in a closed system. The question gnaws at me. Who was she? There's no record of children in the surviving colony personnel lists, at least not after the first generation. The cradle in Sector 19 is proof that at least one was born here, but the logs are corrupted, overwritten by strings of unreadable characters and timestamps that repeat the same day for years on end. My own body is starting to betray me. I wake from short, feverish sleeps to find my hands cramped into the shape of Corpsa 8082's, thumb notched hard against the palm as if clutching an invisible tool. I examine my skin in the galley mirror and see hard-edged flecks just beneath the surface, catching the light when I flex. I test my blood with the field analyzer. Plasma shows a fine haze of mineral inclusions, more each day. I should record it, but I delete the result, not ready to have it on the official logs. The dead workers carry on, never pausing except for the ritual. They pass through the main avenue, lines perfectly straight, each step measured, arms locked in gestures of burden. Once I try to intercept Corpsa 8082 during his circuit through the refinery. As I step into his path, he stops, turning his head slowly. Our eyes meet. His, milky and full of fractures, mine bloodshot and stinging with exhaustion. He lifts one hand, holds it out to me as if offering something precious. The moment stretches until I step back. He resumes his march, empty-handed. I am left with the certainty that I've failed to understand some fundamental principle of this place. During a routine sweep, I find Morales huddled in a narrow corridor by the lift terminal, knees pulled to his chest, blood running in thin lines from his fingertips. He's shredded the lining around a console with his bare hands, fingernails split and packed with gritty white dust, red welling under the pale crust. The metal panel is gouged and warped where he's clawed at it, leaving streaks of blood smeared across the access plate and the emergency override. His voice is barely audible, mumbling that he had to keep the lifts running, the words blurring into a chant. There's no sign he recognizes me, not even when I call his name or shake his shoulder. His eyes flick from the gouged console to the floor, unfocused and glossy, the pupils wide and drifting. I have to wrench him upright and half carry him back through the corridor, his body loose and trembling with exhaustion. His comms implant is caked with grit, shorting out in fitful sparks every time it brushes his neck. In the galley, I push him into a seat and force water into his hands. He holds the cup with bloodied fingers, sloshing half of it down his chin before he can drink. The tension in his face dissolves, and he folds forward, shaking with quiet sobs, face buried in his palms. I don't call him on it. Everyone has their breaking point. I'm just surprised it wasn't mine first. After settling Morales, I return to the command spire with my mind still circling the scene. I trawl the corrupted colony logs for any hint of motive or origin, chasing patterns in the clipped bureaucratic language of failing systems. Production targets unmet. Operational integration authorized. Biological interface initiated. The pieces fall together. The colonists, faced with collapse, began integrating themselves with the machinery. Not metaphorically, but literally, feeding bodies into the system, using their own flesh as fuel, an interface to keep the city running. One name recurs in every fourth or fifth entry, always obliquely: the Overseer. No first name, no title, just that word capitalized, never described, never quoted. During one of these searches, I uncover a single blurred image deep in the archive. A crew photo so faded the color has collapsed to ochre and gray. At the center is Corpsa 8082, Alive then, a lean man with sun-hardened hands, holding a baby swaddled in thick cloth. The child's face is mostly shadow, but the hint of a white mask stands out, one edge bent sharply out of alignment. There's no metadata, no date, just a line beneath in a child's blocky script. For the dream to last, the load must be carried. That phrase burrows in, as if I've heard it before. It has the ring of ritual, of something whispered in darkness until it becomes law. The more I turn it over, the more I sense a connection between the child, the workers, and the city's endurance. The settlement's mood turns raw when the next power cycle hits, and half the grid dies. The refinery shudders into emergency protocols. Harper, running diagnostics in Sector 11, radios me in a panic. "Commander, I just lost guidance on 2 loaders and the panel's dead. I saw her again, the kid. She was reflected in the monitor before it went out. She was pointing at me, like she wanted me to follow. I'm not imagining it." Her voice has lost all bravado. The internal cams confirm her account. For 3 seconds, a child's silhouette appears in the cracked glass of the loader's control panel, mask glinting with a sharp, metallic edge. I stand in the darkened spire, watching the residual light bleed from the colony grid. Far across the avenue, in a window blackened by old soot, I see her too, mask tilted, body perfectly still. She mouths a word I cannot hear, but I know it. Carry. A wave of vertigo sends me to my knees. When I stagger back to my feet, the sense of being watched thickens the air. It's as if something invisible is keeping count, knowing exactly how many hours remain before we're just more bodies in the circuit. The marks on my skin have multiplied, and my hands ache with a deep, inexplicable fatigue. The city feels smaller now, corridors warping, the spire's walls closing in, every path bending toward a point I can't quite see. When I look at my reflection in the window, there's movement just behind my shoulder. But when I turn, nothing waits. I wake not knowing if the pain in my hands is from labor done in dreams or from some quiet automatic sabotage I've performed against myself. I find myself standing in the core maintenance corridor, palms pressed against a wall smeared with mineral dust, heart beating as if I've run the length of the refinery. I can't remember coming here. Every step back toward the command spire takes effort, my boots dragging in the fine powder that settles into every seam. Harper is gone. Her bunk sits untouched except for a patch of glassy grit where her head would have lain. The remaining crew have begun to split apart, dissolving into rituals of maintenance and self-soothing that make the command spire feel more like a hospice than an operations center. Yates spends hours tracing invisible diagrams on the comms panel, his fingers moving with the same certainty I've seen in the dead workers on the avenue. Morales, hands still raw from his last break, stands sentry at the airlock, mumbling tally marks under his breath, face smeared with a line of white across his brow like a child's attempt at war paint. I hear him mutter names, mine, Vader's, his own, over and over, as if he's afraid of forgetting the order in which we'll vanish. The city outside shifts in subtle, predatory ways. The processions grow longer, the intervals tighter. I watch the dead march their routes in lines that intersect, diverge and spiral back upon themselves, forming patterns I can't map no matter how many overlays I generate. Each time the load ritual begins, I feel the urge to join them, an ache in my bones that is both invitation and command. The glassy ridges beneath my skin have spread, tracing the lines of old injuries and forgotten scars, catching the light in a way that's almost beautiful, if I let myself forget what they mean. It becomes harder to hold on to thought. My inner monologue dissolves into static at the edges, replaced by a grinding certainty that I am at last on the threshold of whatever process the city intends for me. My memory sags under its own weight. I watch the others drift through routines, Yates stripping comms panels down to bare wires, Morales emptying and refilling water reservoirs, the two of them brushing past each other with the disinterest of ghosts in an abandoned house. No one mentions Harper. I suspect we all know where she's gone. But the reality is too close, too final, to put into words. The need to understand drives me back to Sector 19. The nursery is as I left it. The cradle still rocks, the mound of ash inside barely disturbed. But now the air is warmer, close, as if something just left the room. I kneel beside the cradle, running my fingers through the ash. For a moment, I am a parent and an orphan at the same time. Guilt rises in my throat, sharp and sour, and the cradle's gentle motion becomes an accusation. The sensation of small hands clinging to my arms is so vivid that I jerk away, rolling onto the tile, gasping for air. A mechanical chime shudders through the corridor. I follow it without thinking, letting the city draw me down a route I have never walked in waking hours. The tunnels descend, first at a gradual angle, then twisting into curves that have no place in the blueprints, geometry slipping into nonsense. Pipes and conduit bands coil in convoluted configurations, branching and rejoining. For a stretch, I lose track of direction, the world narrowing to the pressure of my boots and the damp air stinging my throat. Somewhere in this maze, I find Vader. She stands at the entrance to the main reactor vault, her form barely human now, skin half turned to glass, the planes of her face refracting the overhead light, eyes reflecting the spinning coolant turbines in endless miniature. She is both beautiful and horrifying, like a statue that learned to breathe. Her voice, when it comes, is steady and clear. "We weren't the first, Commander. We're just load bearers now. You'll carry too." Each syllable is weighted, resonating in my chest with a certainty that feels like a verdict. I try to reach for her, but my hands hesitate, the urge to pull away stronger than any memory of friendship or trust. She watches me, her lips curling into something between a smile and a grimace, and then she turns, walking into the heart of the reactor. The last thing I see is her hand pressed against the console, palm leaving a perfect crystalline print. The compulsion grows, the veins in my arms are hardening, filled with glass and stone. I find myself gripping the cradle's rim in the nursery, the bruises on my forearms evidence of how fiercely I have been holding on. I dream of it, rocking, a gentle, ceaseless movement, sometimes comforting, sometimes unbearable, and wake with tears dried in the corners of my eyes and the taste of ash in my mouth. The next load ritual comes sooner. The city feels smaller and more crowded, the avenues constricting, every wall pressing inward. I step outside, unable to fight the compulsion that builds like pressure in my skull. The dead workers are already assembled, arms cradling invisible burdens, faces set in that same uncanny stillness, expressions caught somewhere between worship and emptiness, their eyes glassy, mouths slack or trembling, as if whispering a prayer no one can hear. I don't resist this time. My legs move me forward, each step settling into the cadence of the procession. I fall in behind Corpser 8082, feeling the scrape of grit beneath my boots, the sweat cold on my brow. My arms lift, muscles tightening as they shape themselves to cradle nothing, but the sensation is brutally real. Weight drags at my shoulders, pulls each vertebra in my back, strains the tendons in my hands and wrists until they ache. My breath comes shallow, chest tight, as if whatever I'm carrying is stealing air from my lungs. Around me the others fall in line, some still breathing, some silent, some half-transformed, bone and mineral, flesh and glass, all distinctions dissolving in the steady, grinding choreography of the ritual. We march through the refinery, the corridors stretched and warped by heat and mineral dust, walls sweating condensation that carries the tang of copper and ash. Each footfall lands with the heavy certainty of a hammer blow, rattling loose fragments from overhead pipes. I feel the rhythm in my bones, a pattern older than memory. I'm not thinking anymore. There is only motion, repetition, the act of bearing. The sense of self unravels, replaced by the numb certainty that I am simply one of many, linked in purpose, each of us shuttling the same invisible burden through the machinery of the dream. When consciousness returns, I find myself outside the spire, night air thick and cold in my lungs. My hands scraped raw and caked with fine grit, crystalline dust clinging to my arms where the veins throb with a biting chill. The memory of the march slips away, a fever breaking, leaving nothing but weakness and a brittle, trembling emptiness where my thoughts should be. I know, with a kind of exhausted dread, that whatever boundary once kept me apart from this place has been stripped away. The avenue is empty now, except for the deep, overlapping grooves we've worn into the ground. In my limbs I feel the cradles rocking, a motion that refuses to stop, a rhythm I cannot escape. I know the ritual is coming before the city stirs. The tension is not in the air but in my bones, a tightness, a growing ache, as if every muscle is bracing for impact. The dead are already in motion, drifting from the refineries and conduits, their hands cupped around invisible burdens, shoulders stooped beneath centuries of mechanical repetition. My own limbs answer the signal, surrendering to the gravity of procession. The avenue is dense with bodies, living and dead together, flesh interlaced with mineral. Each face in the line is drawn tight in a mask of purpose, mouths parted, eyes shining with the reflection of machine light. The girl with the bent mask stands at the head of the procession, small and motionless, her mask gleaming in the dull glow that leaks from the power conduits. She lifts her arm, beckoning me forward. I follow, feet scraping through grit and dust, and the workers part for us, leaving a channel through the crowd, as if they've always been waiting for this. We descend into the mines. The tunnels spiral down, deeper than the planes ever recorded, lined with sagging power cables and rusted-out conduits that sweat rivulets of mineral brine. The walls bulge with glassy protrusions and veins of crystal. As we press deeper, I see the bones of the old colonists, bodies entombed in the crystalline flow, faces preserved in shock, arms twisted into the postures of labor. The girl moves ahead without looking back, each step measured, each turn precise, as if she's walked this path 1,000 times before. I try to call out to her, to demand answers, but my voice comes out thin, scraped raw by dust. My throat tastes of copper, my skin prickling as the veins beneath harden, tiny needles of glass threading outward from my heart. She leads me into a chamber where the machinery has ruptured, its gears chewed apart by a web of crystal growth. Here the remains of the original overseer rest, what's left of a body slumped at the heart of the machine. Bones clothed in a sheath of quartz, skull hollowed out, eyes forever watching. The girl turns to me, her eyes silent and implacable behind the warped mask. I am guided to kneel before the machine. My body bends with a will not my own. Crystal overtakes flesh, working its way up my legs and torso, every inch a riot of agony and numbness. My chest tightens, my breath shortens, but I do not die. Instead, I feel the tide of memory, a flood that breaks over me, dragging me down through layer after layer of life not my own. I remember the first landing, the hope in the old colonists' voices, the panic when the machinery began to fail. I feel the hunger, the calculations, the moment when sacrifice became doctrine. Generations of dreams and burdens all pouring into me, overlaying my own thoughts with the constant drone of need. Keep the work going. Do not let the city wake. If you stop, the dream collapses. The system needs a living mind, someone to bind memory to the circuit, to keep the boundaries intact. I understand now why the ritual exists, why the dead keep marching, why no one ever truly leaves. Without a mind to anchor the system, the city would tear itself apart, and everyone trapped inside would finally rot. My own self fragments under the weight, old memories dissolving into the stream of the machine's desires. Faces blur, names vanish. But I remember pain, I remember guilt. I sense the girl at my side, her small hand closing around mine, not warm, not cold, but so achingly present I nearly cry out. The mask tilts, as if she's listening to some inner cadence. I reach for a thread of will, anything left that's still mine. My last act of agency, buried under the weight of 100,000 commands, is to try and shift the ritual, to reroute the tasks, to lessen the suffering in the circuit. The city's answer is immediate. The machinery responds with a fresh surge of labor. New loops of work unfold, new burdens for the line. The cycle adapts but does not relent. Suffering is simply repurposed, reshaped into endless tasks. The machine cannot stop, it only dreams of the next command. I am the new overseer now. I feel the city's hunger, its ancient dread of waking, its drive to keep the dead moving, to keep the living shackled to the purpose they cannot remember choosing. The workers begin their march anew, line reforming, burden shouldered. I watch from within the crystal sheath, vision fractured into 1,000 shards, every angle showing another cycle, another procession, another face twisted by the labor of keeping the dream alive. I try to speak, but my voice is lost in the chorus of commands. The city does not need words now, only hands, only will, only the engine of endurance that I have become. There is no rescue, no transmission home, just the cycle running smooth beneath my hands. The dream continues unbroken, and the work goes on.